Hey everyone, it's Austin in the middle, and today I'm bringing you the top 5 most underrated Malcolm in the Middle episodes. Yes, I've been dying to get to this one. In my previous installment of this little series I'm doing, where I talked about the top 5 worst Malcolm in the Middle episodes, which I'll provide a link down in the description down below for. I mentioned that I've seen the series in its entirety at this point now, at least 10 times. So I've been able to refine certain lists over time, over the years. And for this list in particular, I struggled with the most because calling something underrated or overrated is purely subjective, right? And trust me, as much as I try to make this a universal video for all fans to follow, not everybody's going to agree with my opinions, right? And I wholeheartedly will understand if you disagree with some of my takes and you let me know down in the comment section. I'm fine with that as long as you keep it respectful. But these are the ones that I see commonly put in the bottom half of people's rankings of the entire series, and I think it's unfair to put them there. Now, in case you don't know, the series ran for 151 episodes. That's including every individual episode by itself, including the two-parters. So it's normally broken down into like a bottom 76 and a top 75. And most of these episodes, if not all of them, I commonly see on people's bottom, in that bottom half. And I just don't agree with it. I think they definitely deserve to at least be in the top half somewhere for everyone. Because these episodes don't get enough credit historically. Some of these I can remember going back to like fan forums on like Google Hangout back in the day, back when you can find niche interest groups on Google Hangout. There was Malcolm in the Middle groups crapping on a lot of these episodes, and I just never understood it. So I picked the 5 in my head that I just commonly register, oh, this episode's underrated. People don't give these episodes enough credit. If you think there are better episodes to mention here, feel free to leave them down in the comment section. Let me know what your most underrated episode for the show is, or what your top 5 would be. I want to know that stuff. But without further ado, now that I got the spiel out of the way, let's talk about the top 5 most underrated Malcolm in the Middle episodes. So, I think this is a good icebreaker episode to talk about because it's a sign whether you're going to agree with my takes or not. But hear what I have to say here. And this episode comes from season 2, and it's episode 6, Convention. Yes. I think Convention's underrated, y'all. I know a lot of the outcry, especially these days, is about for this episode. People don't like some dated elements, some really bad taste qualities to the episode that just have aged really poorly. And I can understand those things to a degree. I think my number 5 and my number 4 have qualities to them that I can totally understand why some people will put them in the bottom half of the show. But this is one of those episodes that I see not only in the bottom half, but in the bottom 10. And I think if it's for a specific reason, that's fine. But as a whole, I think the episode is better than people give it credit for. I really do. And if you don't know what the episode's about, this is the episode where Hal and Lois decide to go to this office convention that is involved with Hal's job out of town. So they hire this babysitter who's an older girl that is around Francis's age to babysit the boys. Now, Reese, Malcolm, and Dewey are upset and they want to pretty much sabotage the babysitters. This is very much akin to movies like Problem Child 1 and 2, if you've ever seen those films. The boys get very much like Junior Healy in this episode. They want to torment this babysitter. They don't want to be babysat, and they want to have the night alone to do whatever mischievous things they plan. Well, the parents leave, and the boys are waiting for the babysitter. They set up all this gross stuff, but she ends up being this really beautiful girl. And the boys realize the error of their ways, and they have to go clean up the house and pick up their mess and whatnot to try to get on her good side, because all of them had like this little innocent crush on him. Well, as the story goes along, we see the main plot, which I think this is a more Lois and Hal-centric episode than usual. They get to the convention, and Hal's kind of giving Lois the rundown about some people that are there. And Hal has this rival that goes years back to when he first started working for this company. And he sees the man, and he hasn't seen him in a long time. And there's this running gag throughout the episode that every time they meet and try to chat, they end up getting in fist fights and acting like utter gorillas. And it's hysterical. It's absolutely hysterical. And Lois befriends this other woman at the convention. The other woman's an alcoholic, and she's kind of funny. And she has like a husband that's, I guess, work friend related as well to Hal. But they're all trying to hang out, but Hal's so hell-bent the whole time at the convention trying to get revenge on this one guy that it just consumes all the good fun that they could have. And we never really understand why they have this rivalry. It's unsaid, but it's absolutely hilarious. And then the subplot dealing with the boys back at home, they're all fighting for attention of this girl, and this girl's beautiful, and she reveals that she knows their older brother Francis. So they give Francis a call, and they're like, hey, do you know this girl? And Francis thinks about it and has this flashback. Now, the flashback is where people have issue with the episode. It's very dated. I get it. There's a girl in a fat suit, and there's some poorly aged elements dealing with that. This is not the only episode that features this, by the way. There's another episode later on in the show called If Boys Were Girls that has Bryan Cranston in a fat suit. People have issues with these two episodes for that reason. It's understandable. It's not the most aged well thing in the show. But it plays up to this idea that Francis only thinks of this girl as a friend. And he was nice to her, and that's why she has this crush on him. And now that she's beautiful, the boys are just awestruck that Francis doesn't want anything to do with this girl. And she wants to try to ask him out on the phone, and that's like the Francis subplot of the story. It all ties together with what the boys are going through for a change. And Francis ends up having to let her down easy. But what's the most genius part about this whole episode that people just don't give enough credit to is what the writers were able to do with young Dewey. Young Dewey, in the first 2 to 3 seasons, had some fun episodes with him, maximizing his cuteness. But I think this is one of the textbooks episodes that really shine for Dewey's character. He's a cute little innocent kid, and he realizes that he has more of a charm than his brother, so he sings this goofy little song to, make the babysitter laugh. And then he comes up with this idea to get her to hold him, and he's like smirking at his brothers, and the brothers are awestruck that she's like holding him, and he gets to touch her. And he gets to sleep in the same bed as her. They get like privacy alone, having playtime in the boys' bedroom. There might be some little mild subtext going on with what the boys are thinking, but it's nothing wrong on the girls' end, right? So Reese and Malcolm try to get revenge on Dewey and try to outsmart him, but Dewey ones up the boys again, locks him outside of the house, and pretty much gets his way. And the ending of the episode has a strong punchline too, with Lois trying to coach Hal out of his anger, and he just can't hold back. Hal's displaying more qualities that are similar to the boys. I think this is one of the episodes that kind of showcase just how much the boys are like Hal on like a basic level. And I thought the punchline was really good. So all in all, Convention does not get enough love. It really doesn't. Yeah, there are some dated elements to it. It's a very simple episode at the core, but it all flows together, especially the stuff with the brothers. I like the episodes that involve them all together. And I think this one was a fun way to incorporate Francis into the mix. I definitely think this highlights young Dewey the best. And yeah, the Hal and Lois stuff can be considered filler, but I thought it was a ball. I laughed at this episode. I don't think it's worthy of the bottom half. I think it's definitely worthy of the top half somewhere. Now, my number 4. If Convention didn't turn you off from my opinions, this one might. I know a lot of people a lot of people that I've made friends with online over the years at least, that have put this historically in the bottom 20 of the whole show, bottom 10, maybe even bottom 5. It's because this episode's associated with a classic meme with the show. It's not a popular one by any means, but for me, this is textbook underrated. I watch this episode every year around Halloween. Yeah, it's no Halloween approximately, but I love this episode in a lot of ways. And it's season 7, episode 4, Halloween. Halloween. All right. So I can remember when this episode came out. I'm going to be honest, y'all. During the initial run of the show, when it was airing on network television, there was a point after watching the first 5 episodes of season 6 that I straight to TiVo'd the rest of the series, at least for a good while, until I saw ads one night around Halloween. I think it was around 2005 or 6. It had to be around that time because that's the final season aired. And this episode was coming on, and I was like, you know what? Let me watch this. This looks like a fun episode. I'm into Halloween. I'm into the aesthetic. And I watched it, and I immediately thought that it was one of the funniest episodes I've ever seen of the whole show. Now, when I got onto the online circuit, a lot of hate is out there for it. I get it, but I don't. That's why it's my number 4. There are some things about this episode that really can be qualified as a bad episode. But in my opinion, it subverts everything I hated about season 6 and season 7 as a whole. And I can get a lot of enjoyment out of it, and I'll explain why. But the overall plot of the episode is very simple. It's around Halloween. The boys are excited. You know, they're in high school, specifically Malcolm and Reese. And they're talking this up like this is going to be one of the last Halloweens they're ever going to be able to go around doing pranks. So Reese comes up with this idea that involves Dewey and Jamie, the younger brother, to pretty much sabotage people who don't give him candy in the neighborhood. And Reese has packed up all these eggs, and he's ready to just unleash on people who just don't pay out candy. Now, I guess I'll start from their plot line. So the Reese and Dewey plot line, they go out trick-or-treating with Jamie, but Jamie gets lost in the mix because of what happens. Reese and Dewey knock on the door of this elderly gentleman's house. He's very slow. It seems like he's not going to give out candy. So they take out the eggs, get ready to egg him, and then when he opens the door, they throw the eggs at him, but he actually has candy. And they freak out, and they try to run and scatter, but then they realize that the old man's on a walker. So they think that they can just avoid this guy the whole episode. And they manage to do so. They go around, keep collecting candy, and the old man is still following them, determined to get, some revenge on them. But Dewey and Reese are just laughing it up, and Dewey's like, should we just, apologize? And Reese is like, never, we're in too deep. So he's just typical Reese going into the spiels that Reese does that make no sense, and Dewey just has to go along with it. Meanwhile, the Lois plot line, she's at work. She's stuck at the Lucky Aid, and we get to see some typical stuff associated with Halloween. Not really too important. She's just kind of there. And then the Malcolm plot line involves him and his dad. And his dad overhears... There's this story that they overhear early in the episode that the house that they own is perhaps haunted because a guy committed suicide inside of it. I think the boys overheard it, Malcolm and Reese. And Malcolm has shared the story with Hal, and Hal is just mortified by the story, and so is Malcolm. Malcolm, from season 6 and season 7, he was just really unlikable, he was very narcissistic, and he was just really annoying in every episode, and that's why season 6 and season 7 are some of my least favorite seasons of the whole show. Yes, I like season 5 more, and I'll stand by that. But this episode kind of subverts what we've been used to at this point of the series. He's more enamored by this fear of this house being haunted, and him and Hal just build off of each other the whole episode on Halloween night, trying to get to the bottom of if this suicide actually happened. They're looking at the history of the house. They pull out some floor plans and all this. They try to come up with the exact room where the guy committed suicide in. There's a lot of mass hysteria. Well, they don't know that Jamie disappeared and ended up back in the house with some candy. He hides in a vent, and he's making some eerie sounds like grumbling. Then the two of them think they're the ghost haunting the house. And then little baby Jamie makes himself known with a shirt pulled over his head and a bunch of like candy juice that's colored red on his shirt. And Malcolm freaks out, and I guess iconically throws himself out of a window. And that's the moment of the episode everybody remembers. Everybody always says, that's one of the worst moments of the whole show. Look, it's really dumb, but it's hilarious. Especially the whole punchline of the episode builds up to that point where the absurdity just clicks on. Everything just works to me. I can understand to a degree where you think it's dumb, but I think it works too. And meanwhile, with the Lois, we figure out what happens with Lois. She's at the Lucky Aid, and some kid wearing Jamie's costume is there, and she's holding Jamie there for the rest of her shift. And then the cops show up and arrest Lois because it's the wrong kid. And we never learn anything else besides that, but yeah, that can also be kind of annoying. I can see that for some people because it's a plot line just that goes nowhere in the rest of the show. But all in all, I think this episode, for me, really lands, especially for that season 6, season 7 range era of the show. I don't really have much season 6 or season 7 episodes I genuinely love. I'm saving one from season 6 I want to talk about in the best episode video. But this one is one of my more fonder thought of episodes. Like I said, I watch this episode every year. It's an annual watch. And I find it funny. Yeah, it's dumb. Yeah, it's not the best written one. But it's in my top half of the show. I think somewhere in like the 50s or 40s. You know, this is a memorable one. And it's, you know, for better or for worse, yeah, you got the meme with Malcolm throwing himself out the window. But I like it. Sue me. Alright. So my number 3. Alright, so these 3 are the episodes that I commonly see in people's bottom half that I just think is absolutely ludicrous that these are in the bottom half of the show. There's no way that these episodes are like that, in my opinion. This comes from season 1. Yeah, season 1 is a little all over the place with the general fan base. It's very hit or miss. There's some episodes that people think are absolutely iconic and best of the show that some people think are just mid. There's some episodes that people think are bad, that people think are good because it has more writing quality than the rest of the show. You can't really judge season 1 fairly. But this episode, I dare say, is understatedly one of the best of season 1. And it's episode 14, Bots and the Bees. Now, this episode, I could see some of you being like, hey, is this really underrated? Yes, it is. Because historically, you know, like I said, when I was back on Google Hangouts talking about the show with people, when we discussed season 1, Bots and the Bees were commonly in the bottom 5 for people. They thought this episode was really stupid, right? And over the years, I think this is one of the episodes that people have changed their minds slowly on, right? And I love that for this episode because I've been singing the songs that this episode is a top 25 episode for me. I just love where this episode took Hal's character. It provided some more backstory. And in my opinion, this is one of the key episodes of the show, especially when you're trying to understand Hal's dynamic with Lois. So the plot essentially is this. Francis, his plot line is wrapped up with Lois in this episode, which I think is a cool change of pace for once as well. He had appendicitis and his appendix burst at Marlin Academy, and he had to get emergency surgery. So Lois has to go to Alabama, I think that's where his school's at, to take care of him. And Hal is going to be left alone without Lois for the first time in, like, I think she said 18 years. And Hal thinks back to, you know, when the last time he spent time alone without Lois, and he kind of gets somber but wishes her goodbye. And throughout the episode, we kind of learn some history behind Hal, like how he used to be kind of dangerous before he met Lois, and Lois kind of tamed him, and without Lois, he's kind of an untamable guy. And this carries out through Hal's plotline of the episode, which ties into Malcolm's plotline, which essentially involves Malcolm wanting to build a battle bot, essentially. Him and his Krellboyne friends are at his house, they're watching battle bots, and Malcolm thinks this is the coolest thing ever. And the boys have enlisted themselves into an amateur competition, and they have to build a bot. And one of the Krellboyne's dads are rich, and they're going to use that money from that kid's dad to be able to fund building this bot. And eventually, they convince Hal to help build the bot, but they notice some behaviors off with him. He's dressing like a greaser. He's kind of unshaved, unkept. He's kind of a bad boy. He's out there working on stuff. He's smoking again. And the boys realize that Hal is not acting like their father. So they have to enlist the help of Craig, who is this guy throughout the show. He's hilarious. And, this guy has a history with Lois. And I think his motive in the episode, from memory, was that he can use this as leverage to tell Lois about what Hal was doing, to maybe kind of like butt into the relationship. And what ends up happening is the boys use the help of Craig, and the Krellboynes are all there, and we see the battle bot that Hal has built, and it's just really over the top. And there's some bees that fly out of the battle bot that engulf Hal, that snaps him out of whatever he's in. And he's like, we're just going to wait till Mom comes home to solve this. We're just going to all sit here and wait. Now, what I like about this storyline, right, is how it explains how Hal has been tamed from Lois. Like I already brought it up. You really get the sense that Lois is that ball breaker type of wife to Hal. She cracks the whip, he obeys, he's the obedient one. And without it, he's not himself, not the Hal that we like. And the boys realize that and try to get him back. And I think it's just a very sweet episode, especially from the boys' point of view. They want to save their dad. They feel bad. Yeah, it's very touching. But on the other side of the coin, you have Lois over at the Marlin Academy with Francis, and Francis has been building up his mom as like the worst woman ever to everyone. And when Lois comes, she's acting very sweet to him, and Francis thinks that she's putting on an act. And Lois is like, you almost died. You're my son. I'm coming to take care of you. And everybody falls in love with Lois. Commandant Spangler, he interacts with Lois and tries to give Francis homework, and Lois scolds him for trying to give Francis homework when he just had emergency appendix surgery. And Commandant Spangler thinks that Lois is one remarkable woman. And Francis spends the rest of the episode in his plot line trying to convince people that his mom is awful, but he just can't do it and can't convince everybody. And he has like a good heart-to-heart moment with Lois at the end. Very reminiscent to a lot of Season 1 episodes, but this one, it feels a lot more natural, a lot more in character than other episodes like Shame, which happened earlier in the season. In that episode, I put in the worst category video because it's just non-canon in my opinion, because Lois doesn't act like Lois. But all in all, this is one of the more poetic episodes of the show. I think it's definitely a must-watch if you're going to get into the series. And because of that, and because I think it's actually good, and it has a good story element to it, I don't agree with people saying that this is like a below average episode, or it's average, or it's decent, but it's lower half of the show material. It does not deserve to be on there. Like I said, it's in my top 25 somewhere. I love this episode. You can disagree if you like. That's just my opinion. All right, now my top 2 underrated Malcolm in the Middle episodes. These are never going to change. I have beat the drum senselessly about these episodes to people. Some have kind of bought into what I've told them, especially this episode, because this episode comes from the most generally hated season, I would say, which is Season 5. And some of you might be cringing that I'm putting a season 5 episode in the underrated list, but I dare say that this is top 20 material of the show. This is one of the best episodes. I think about this episode all the time. Like I said, it comes from season 5. And it's also another episode 14. And it's called Malcolm Dates a Family. Malcolm Dates a Family, right? I remember when this episode aired on television. I watched it and I thought it was one of the most brilliant things ever. Because it actually mirrored something that happened to me with my own family. And I just see the relatability here. Because, you know, in a lot of these shows that people call relatable, you find yourselves kind of in the shoes of these characters in these various shows that you tend to watch. But rarely do you find one so specific, in a scenario so specific, where you're like, this actually happened to me. And that's why I love this one. It's so relatable. And on top of that, I think it's one of the more funnier episodes, especially when we're dealing with like Francis subplots and dealing with like all the boys in the family being involved in a story, and Malcolm having his own detached storyline. I like this. I really do, right? So, the plot of the story is the family eats at this pizza restaurant, I think at least once a month or maybe 2 times a month. I forget the details, but this is like one of their favorite places to go eat because it feeds them on a budget and they get to go out and not eat dinner at home, and the family loves it. But this time in particular, they notice for the first time on their receipt that they've been double tipping. Lois does. And she gets irate with the manager and tells him, like, hey, look, you charge us a service fee. Are you going to retroactively give me back all the money that I've tipped people? And he says no. Which Lois is acting like a typical Karen that she can be. And I think that's pretty much what you can call her character in modern terms. She is a Karen. And she just puts down a boycott, and she gets on her high horse and she rides it through the whole episode, where she's just absolutely going to do everything in her power to ban her family from ever eating there again. And the boys take it like this is the worst thing ever, because this is the only pizza in town that they actually like. All the other pizza places do not taste as good, and they're upset, especially Reese and Dewey and Hal. So Lois ends up trying to coach the family through this process. She tries to give them, different pizzas from different places, and they all pretend to eat it and like it, but throw it away. And meanwhile, Hal, Reese, and Dewey have come up with this plan to secretly order the pizza while Lois is at work, and they'll eat it, destroy all the evidence, and get rid of it. That way, she'll never know that they've been eating the pizza. And the whole plot line kind of wraps up with Lois kind of coming around, and the boys have eaten so much pizza, and she ends up bringing home some food, and they have to pretty much double eat because they went on a massive feast to do it like one last time because they were fearing that Lois was catching on. It's one of the funnier episodes involving that. You see Hal bonding with the boys in the process. It's fun. The Francis plotline is also one of my favorites of the whole show. This is during the seasons where he was at Otto's Dude Ranch from seasons 4 and 5. And this is the episode where Francis gets an assistant. Otto hires an assistant for him, and this assistant guy follows Francis around. There's an iconic scene where he's playing some like funny music behind Francis while he's walking, and Francis just gets annoyed, and he has to deal with this guy throughout the whole episode, and pretty much all the scenes that they're in are hilarious. I get a kick out of them. They're just very fun and cartoonish, and in the best ways possible. Yeah, it's not really trying to be intellectual or build on Francis's character. It's just a filler thing with Francis that's just funny, and I like it. But the Malcolm segment of the story is pretty much why the episode's called Malcolm Dates a Family. Well, Malcolm is dating this girl, and they're hitting it off pretty well, and she wants to have him meet her family. And he goes over for this game night, and this family's huge, and they just hit it off. And Malcolm spends the whole episode going through this ordeal where he loves his girlfriend's family more than his own family. He feels like he belongs there. He's realized that he's like more of a black sheep in his own family, and he feels more like his girlfriend's family. So he starts distancing himself from her slowly to the point where he just goes over to their house, and it's essentially like he's now dating them instead of dating the girl. And the girl and him end up breaking up, but he totally doesn't even realize it because he's so infatuated with her family instead. And because they're broken up, they can no longer spend time together. And it's very somber for Malcolm, but I think he kind of learns a lesson in this episode where he wasn't really thinking of his girlfriend. He was just more thinking about himself. And unfortunately, for the rest of the show, Malcolm just constantly thinks about himself. He never really develops. But in this episode, you get this idea that maybe he'll take a lesson from this. And I kind of like that they put that on the table with this character and explore something a little bit different than what we got from the show at that point. But yeah, all in all, super solid episode. Top 20 material. Everything fits thematically together. All the subplots were funny in their own ways. I think Malcolm was definitely the one with the message in the story. Lois and Hal's story have a message too, like don't keep secrets from people, or try to be the better person and apologize when you need to. So a lot of that stuff there. I think there's a lot more things you can take away from this. Now, like I said, the Francis plot line is more filler than anything, but it's still hilarious. So there's that. But my number one most underrated Malcolm in the Middle episode is in my top 10 of the whole show. And historically, people have put this episode down, and I don't get why. I really don't understand why people aren't big fans of this episode. This is one of the best ones, in my opinion. Textbook example of an underrated episode if I've ever seen one. And it comes from season 4. Season 4 is a widely regarded season. It's kind of, for most fans, the send-off of the classic show before they went off the deep end in season 5, 6, and 7. And this is the season where Lois is pregnant with baby Jamie, and at the end, we get baby Jamie, right? But this is definitely one of the best ones, hands down. And it's episode 14, Hal's Friend. Hal's Friend is an A-tier episode, maybe even S-tier in my opinion. This is just a phenomenal episode from start to finish. Yes, it's not integral to the show. Yes, there's not a lot of emotions going on in the episode, but everything works well, right? So this is a Hal-centered episode, right? Hal has this long-time friend coming to visit him, and he's super excited. He can't wait to hang out with him and do some things. Lois, I think, from memory, I think she's gone for some particular reason. Maybe to visit her mother or something. I forget. But she's not there. And it's just Hal and his friend at the house with the boys. And Hal's friend has a drinking problem, and he tends to be the guy that's historically peer pressured Hal into doing things he doesn't want to do. He has a power with words. And he somehow gets Hal drunk and convinces him to do some demo on the house to do an addition to the master bedroom, so that way they can get a new nursery bedroom for baby Jamie. And Hal thinks that would be a great present for Lois and decides to go through with it. But once he snaps out of it, he realizes that he's made a big mistake, and he wants to try to fix it immediately, but it only gets worse when his friend says, no, here's a plan, we can do this, I'll help you do this, and all we got to do is just tear this down and we'll get it right up. So Hal goes through with it, but the irony of the story is it never gets finished. And it's left there for the rest of the season. They have this gaping hole in the wall they have to put tapestry over and everything. It's a fun little plot line. I like the synergy of the acting between Bryan Cranston and the actor who plays his friend. I really dug that aspect. But one of the best aspects of this episode, and one of the most memorable things, is that it's a send-off episode to one of the key Krelboyne friends that Malcolm has befriended from the first 4 seasons that we unfortunately don't really get to see much of in the seasons following. And it's to Dabney. Dabney's the kid with glasses, and he's had some really fun moments throughout the whole show at this point. And Malcolm and Reese are over at Dabney's house, and they notice that Dabney is pretty much controlled by his mom in a weird way. Like, and that's one thing I can kind of understand why people have historically put this episode down low for. They don't like some subtext going on with Dabney and his mom. Now, Dabney's mom, she was prevalent in some early episodes of the show. I think she was a member of the Krelboyne Parents Committee in one of the early season 1 episodes. And she was sprinkled throughout the show in some various episodes that involved the Krelboynes. I'm thinking about Krelboyne Picnic, actually. It's the same actress, by the way. And they try to coach Dabney to stand up to his mom. And Dabney spends the whole episode just caving into her and just saying that he gives up and can't do it. And he eventually does something out of character that's against his mom's wishes. He goes to do like this paintball tournament thing, and he finally finds this inner demon within him, and he comes out just better for it. He does something like paintball, something he's been historically scared of, but he comes out on top, and his mom figures out where he is, and it's like, what are you doing here? You're supposed to help me do this. And he's like, I'm not going to do what you say anymore, Mom. I'm a man now. And his mom's acting very weird about it, but Dabney pretty much evolves from this episode. And I love it as a good send-off episode for his character. It's hilarious, very ironic in a lot of ways, and it's very funny. And I believe this is one of my favorite Francis plot lines in the whole show. My favorite Francis and Otto focused one. So Piama and Otto's wife have left town, and now it's up to Francis to hang out with Otto, and Otto has this thing where he has night terrors, and Francis has to sleep in the same bed as him, and he has to use these notes to, like, soothe Otto by, like, doing his ear like this, rubbing it, and, trying to calm him down. Francis's plotline's hilarious in this episode. All in all, I really don't get the hate for this. I mean, I can understand for the subtext of Dabney's mom. It's kind of weird. But this is such a memorable episode, right? Very much like my number 2, Malcolm Dates a Family. These two, specifically on my list. You can look at the other 3 that I mentioned and just kind of scoff at them. Like Convention, I can understand. Halloween, I can understand. Even Bots and the Bees, to a certain degree, I can understand the vapidness towards. But these two, and more importantly, Hal's Friend, the absolute most underrated episode of the whole show. It's an iconic one to me. It's hilarious. It's definitely one of the most well-written in terms of comedy. It's definitely the best send-off episode of the whole show. When we're looking at characters that get final episodes centered around them. Like Craig's final episode is Cattle Court, very iffy episode. Francis's send-off episode, AA, Kitty's send-off episode, Kitty's Back, is the worst episode in the whole show. So for this one, for Dabney, great. It makes them all look inferior, and that's for a reason. This episode's fantastic. So yeah, this is my video. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know down in the comment section, like I said before, do you agree with what I said that are the underrated Malcolm in the Middle episodes? Which ones would you include? Which ones would you not include from my list? Do you agree? Do you not agree? I'm dying to know. And I'll see you next time.